Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the Colorado Energy Smart Transportation Initiative. My name is Bill Holloway. I'm a Transportation Policy Analyst at SSTI, and I'll be managing today's call. I just have a few comments before we get started. First, I'd like to introduce our guests. Deborah Perkins-Smith and Alex Schroeder will be providing introductory remarks. Deborah has over 30 years in transportation planning and is currently the director of the Division of Transportation Development at the Colorado Department of Transportation. Alex is the Senior Manager of Transportation Fuels at the Colorado Governor's Energy Office, where she works to develop, implement, and promote alternative fuels in the state. Alex Schroeder, Michelle Schuerman, Amy Schmaltz, and Jeff Sudmeyer will be our presenters. Michelle is a CDOT statewide regional planning section manager with more than 25 years of experience in transportation and environmental planning. Amy is an MPO and regional planner at CDOT, and Jeff manages the CDOT MPO and regional planning unit. In addition, we have several other panelists on the line that will be available to answer questions following the presentation. Sabrina Williams is an air quality specialist with CDOT. She constructs and maintains mobile source emissions inventories and modeling platforms and manages air quality projects. Sonia Hamill, project manager for the Energy Smart Transportation Initiative, is the principal of Hamill Environmental Consulting and is a strategy and program consultant to foundations, nonprofits, governments, and corporations in the areas of climate, energy, and transportation. And Beth Tenner, assistant manager and co-facilitator for the Energy Smart Transportation Initiative, is the principal at the New Directions Collaborative and has worked for over 20 years in the business, government, and social sectors to advance initiatives with sustainability goals. We will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. If you have questions, please type them in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen, and they'll be answered in the order that they are received at the end of the presentation. A recording of this webinar will be made available on the SSTI website on Monday. Also, please join us for next month's webinar on SSTI's work with the Kansas Department of Transportation. We've been working with KDOT to assess the transportation-related costs attributable to school site selection and have developed recommendations for how to improve site selection and reduce associated transportation costs. That webinar will be held on April 27th at 1 p.m. Central Time, and you can register for that on the SSTI website. That's ssti.us. And now I will hand it off to our to Jeff Sudmeyer to operate the slides, and Deborah and Alex can take it away.
Thank you, Bill. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Deborah Perkins-Smith, and I'm the Director of Transportation Development at the Colorado Department of Transportation. And CDOT, along with the Governor's Energy Office, are very pleased to host this webinar on behalf of State Smart Transportation Initiative. The success we achieved in this project in just 6 short months was the result of a consortium of agencies and local planning partners. One of the keys to making this effort successful was the ongoing support that agency staff received from the respective senior management, including our executive directors. The commitment, dedication, and hard work of staff were pivotal in accomplishing what we did in such a short time. What we will share with you today is how the process was strategically designed, how strategies were developed and selected, lessons learned, and our next steps. Though everything that will be shared today may not be fully replicable or applicable to your agency, it can serve as a foundation and can be tailored to your goals and needs. In the words of CDOT's Executive Director Don Hunt, he said, "This initiative serves as a great example of advancing our Governor's desire for a more effective, efficient, and elegant state government, and will help place Colorado in a national leadership role in considering energy and transportation." So I want to thank you all for your interest in Energy Smart Transportation Initiative webinar, and we hope that you find this informative and insightful. Our partner in this endeavor, as I mentioned, was the Colorado Governor's Energy Office, and so I'll now ask Alex Schroeder, the Transportation Senior Manager with GEO, to say a few opening comments as well.
Excuse me, Bill, can you please advance the slide? We're having a hard time on our end.
Oh, sure. Yeah, just say slide and I'll move it ahead.
Okay, thanks, Deb, and thanks very much. You know, I think I'll echo a lot of the comments Deb said. This has really been a great partnership, and it was truly, I think we were all impressed at what we were able to accomplish in such a short amount of time. And I think we'll talk a bit about how we did that, really keeping the process on track and also making sure that we are focusing on goals and strategies that we thought were realizable in the amount of time that we had. Just to put some perspective on this, from our office, transportation is the largest energy end user in the state of Colorado. It's a big opportunity that we see to really promote cleaner, more affordable technologies. Currently, we get about 96% of our transportation energy from petroleum. We import 2/3 of that from other states, so this is obviously a big economic development driver as well. I think we're all aware of rising gas prices. There are headlines about it every day. So in retrospect, I think this has been a great initiative, and this really does position us to be proactive in the conversation and not necessarily be reacting to some of these headlines. So again, I think from the perspective of state government, it does promote more effective partnerships across agencies. We've started a dialogue that we expect to continue for a long time going forward. We've actually got a trip next week that we're going to be making with some of our representatives from CDOT to meet with our colleagues in Utah. So we're already starting to see the fruits of our labor and some of these partnerships moving forward. So I think that being said, I'd just like to thank CDOT and certainly SSTI for this opportunity. We appreciate your support of the project and also for hosting this webinar. And so I think with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Next slide, please.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I would like to give you a quick overview of the presentation. So we'll talk a little bit about the background, the energy impacts of transportation, the collaborative process, how it was designed, the strategies that were developed, how we analyze those strategies, implementation, next steps, lessons learned, and some takeaways also. Next slide, please. So a little bit about SSTI. The State Smart Transportation Initiative is funded by the U.S. DOT and the Rockefeller Foundation. It operates in 3 ways: as a community of practice, where practicing agencies can learn together and share experiences as they implement innovative smart transportation policies. In addition to that, the community practice meetings are held quarterly with executive directors. This allows for the EDs to get together to grapple with and discuss the same issues that they're all trying to deal with nationwide and looking for potential solutions to those. The second is that as a source of in-depth, no-cost direct technical assistance to the agencies on transformative and replicable reform efforts. And of course, this is what we got from SSTI, was this wonderful technical assistance. And as a source to the wider transportation community, including local, state, and federal agencies, in its effort to reorient practice to changing social and financial demands. And as you will see as we go through this presentation, that these resources are not only made available to DOTs, but to other state, local, and federal agencies as well. Next, please. So a little bit about CDOT. The backdrop of Colorado's transportation system, is, many of you know, is not only beautiful, but it's very unique and diverse. From the foothills, Rocky Mountains, to the plains, and what I like to call everything in between. People choose Colorado to live and play based on this diverse geographic areas and what it has to offer. The transportation system serves not only local needs, but economic development, agriculture, and summer and winter recreationists. So with all of this, CDOT manages the state transportation system under the direction of 11 transportation commissioners from various districts. CDOT oversees construction and maintenance of 9,000 miles of highway and 3,447 bridges in Colorado. The planning staff coordinates the comprehensive statewide multimodal planning process with 15 transportation planning regions, 5 of which are MPOs, and we are also responsible for developing statewide long-range plans. Next, please. A little bit about GEO. As Alex mentioned, it's housed in the governor's office. It seeks to effectively, efficiently, and elegantly advance energy efficiency and renewable clean energy resources, while also focusing on increasing business and job creation in Colorado. So a little bit about the background and why we put forth this proposal to SSTI. Well, back in 2009, Senate Bill 9-108, the FASTER bill, was in place. And in this bill, it focused on planning primarily, which talked about the inclusion of additional planning factors. These were environmental stewardship and actually addressing the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the planning process and in the statewide plan. So we took a baby step in June of 2010 to kind of begin conversations around this. And CDOT hosted an ASTRO-paid climate change workshop. It was a 2-day workshop which included staff-level workshop where they kind of rolled up our sleeves and started to talk about what we might want to focus on. And then a report out the next day to executives. And through that workshop, there was unanimous consensus that additional interagency collaboration needed to take place, would be useful, that we needed to leverage resources and develop consistent messaging. So I would say maybe, if my timeline is correct, about 6 months after that, CDOT was approached by SSTI to provide information on our current efforts that supported smart transportation. So we submitted some information to SSTI, and shortly after they wanted to have a phone interview with us. It was quite a lengthy interview, and actually it was very promising. So shortly after that, CDOT was asked by SSTI to submit a project of our choice for technical assistance grants that further promoted smart transportation efforts. So we thought collectively that this would be a prime time and a good opportunity to address this new planning factor. So this was our initial step. Next, please. So a little bit in context about energy impacts of transportation. When you look at the pie chart, please note that this is GHG emissions by sector. So this kind of puts us in the overall context of energy and transportation. So 23% of statewide GHG emissions come from the transportation sector. Colorado's transportation GHG emissions have been growing at a rate of nearly 3% per year over the past 20 years. Statewide motor gasoline consumption increased by 41% from 1990. Total transportation fuel costs for the state in 2009 totaled $6.9 billion. In 2009, Colorado residents spent approximately $1,500 per person on transportation fuel, and we know that's increasing. So a little bit about this CDOT and GEO partnership. Originally, it was CDOT who put forth the grant proposal to SSTI, but given the intersection of our missions and interests, CDOT engaged the Governor's Energy Office to co-sponsor. And next slide, please. Next slide, please. And jointly oversee the initiative together. This partnership made sense, and so it's been a marriage that's proved very fruitful. So the next slide talks a little bit about the background and the collaborative process. Back, please, one slide. Thank you. And I'll go into depth a little bit more about that, but I really want to focus on this mission statement. And the reason why is I think it was really instrumental in developing this mission statement early on in the process for a couple of reasons. The team seemed to become more vested in the initiative, and it also served as an excellent tool in keeping participants focused on the task at hand. We had literally 6 months to get this completed, so we used this periodically to come back and say, hey, you know, we need to create some short and quick wins here, and how can we best do this? So I would like to take a moment to just quickly read this for you. The Energy Smart Transportation Initiative developed a framework for considering energy efficiency and greenhouse gas emissions in transportation decision-making, ultimately enhancing all transportation services to our citizens, promoting clean transportation technologies, and improving the economy of our state. Next, please. So as you can see from the slide, there's a host of participants. There was a consortium of local, state, federal agencies, and our planning partners. And actually, the one thing that was really easy for us was to identify these partners. We actually just went back to these folks that we worked with during the climate change workshop and engaged them in the continuing dialogue. It seemed to really make sense, and it was a way to leverage resources and make a difference. Next, please. So what was the goals of Energy Smart Transportation? It was to retain more dollars and jobs in the Colorado economy, address air quality issues such as ozone and greenhouse gas emissions, improve the environment and health of all Coloradans, demonstrate that Colorado is a national leader in transportation innovation, and overall enhance the quality of life of Colorado citizens. Some of the objectives, and I might want to add too that the goals and objectives were developed by the CE team. So it was really important that these come from them. So the objectives were to develop a framework to enhance the planning process, to encompass transportation energy and greenhouse gas emissions, identify new tools to evaluate energy aspects and associated GHG emissions in transportation planning, identify, encourage, and disseminate new or enhanced programs and initiatives that showcase innovation and energy reduction, better align and coordinate the actions of state, regional, and local agencies that affect energy use, economic development, and GHG emissions reduction for transportation to ensure efficient, effective decision-making, develop concurrent, clear, and consistent messages on energy reduction, economic growth, and GHG emissions that could be used by various agencies and partners. Next, please. There were two core teams, in addition to the CE team, that were in place throughout the duration of the project. One was the project management team, which consisted of consultant, SSTI, CDOT, and GEO staff. And then there was our project advisory team, which was interdisciplinarian, and we met 5 times between January and June of 2011, in which they provided some really great strategic input. Next, please. So how did we determine what this collaborative process would look like? Well, we knew from the get-go that a cookie-cutter process wouldn't have been beneficial or productive for this initiative. So in the spirit of collaboration, we interviewed our participants with over 20 interviews, and we talked, the questions asked were how Colorado might consider energy use in transportation, where successful practices and programs were already in place. That was one of the consistent messages that we heard throughout this initiative, is let's piggyback on existing efforts and embellish those, and what type of collaborative process design would work most effectively for this endeavor. So having the participants engage in the development of the process and further refinement as we worked through the initiative really allowed for better engagement and a stick-to-itness kind of attitude. After this, we developed a charter agreement, which was developed with our CE team members, which includes roles and responsibility, and articulated our mission, goals, and objectives. Next, please. Some of the things that we heard when we interviewed the agencies and was pivotal in designing this collaborative were quite a few things that really, I think, led to the success of this initiative. First of all, it said limit participation to those directly involved in the transportation planning process, federal, state, local agencies, and MPOs. So let me caveat that by saying that this is just one of the future conversations to be had with the larger stakeholder group. Early engagement of senior level staff was really important. Subject matter expert participation in the process. Avoid duplication and piggyback on existing efforts. Streamline the collaborative effort wherever you can. Identify immediate quick wins. Limit to short to medium-term strategies. Create specialized work groups to do the heavy lifting, and then report back to a full group. Next, please. We had 3 CE meetings, collaborative effort team meetings throughout the process, and the final one, which I will talk about later on. In May 2011, this was a kickoff meeting. I would say this was really important. This was at an executive senior level, which also staff attended. But it really was important because we garnered the support from executive level team members who really were dedicated and committed to allowing the staff to provide the resources and time on the CE. In June of 2011, is when we did some initial brainstorming around the mission, goals, objectives, initial approach, and EST charter agreement. And the reason that was so important is it was just the first meeting when all of us got in the room and said, you know, what are we trying to do here? What are we trying to achieve? So the brainstorming was really instrumental. Next, please. So how were we going to get through this in 6 short months? So what we thought would be, and what we heard also from the CET members, what the best way to do this was to form work groups who would do some of the heavy lifting and then come back and report out. So there were 4 groups formed: advanced technology vehicles, alternate fuels, smart systems and smart trips, planning processes, data and measurement. And then we explored the purpose of these work groups, and what their charge was to identify specific strategies that can improve energy efficiency, use available data and measuring techniques, and look at ways to include energy efficiency and GHG in the transportation and planning process, and ultimately in decision making. The 3 or 4-legged stool that is on this graphic really describes the types of approaches to reducing GHG emissions from transportation. So depending on the source, the legs are vehicles, fuels, VMT, and vehicle systems operations. So that's really why we broke up the groups in the way that we did. The work groups collectively met 12 times between July and October, so there was a lot of work done in just a few months. Next, please. The forming of the work groups and data measurement group was key in developing the strategies, which we'll talk about in a minute, designing the screening process and measuring the strategies. But I think more important, what we learned about developing these work groups was not just to get the job done, but participants were able to self-select which group they were interested in participating in and which group aligned best with their agency's mission and area of influence. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex, who's going to talk a little bit more about the work groups and the work that was done. Oh, wait a minute. No, actually, it's still Michelle. I apologize. I was handing that off rather quickly. I'm not going to go through these work groups because, again, my colleagues are going to describe those in a little bit more detail and around the strategies that were developed. But if you can go to the next slide, please, which is around the planning process. Thank you. I want to preface this conversation a little bit about the work that was done in the planning work group by saying that this was just really the beginning of a number of additional conversations and coordinations that will need to be done with a larger group of stakeholders, you know, how to address energy and GHG emissions reduction in the planning process. And we're looking at really engaging a broader stakeholder group during the development of our next statewide long-range plan, which our commission just kicked off in February. So what the planning work group did is they explored how to make energy smart decisions in planning by first mapping out the planning process. Next slide, please. Thank you. And identifying key points where energy could be considered. So this graphic is a little bit difficult to read. We apologize, but we have policies, and then we go through the planning process, and then post-planning, which is project development. So we looked at things not only in the planning process, and actually some of our strategies really developed more in project development. So the areas that we looked at for the planning process were policies. Perhaps we could adopt a high-level policy to consider energy and transportation infrastructure planning and spending across all aspects of CDOT's work. So that would include planning, purchasing, facilities, design, and construction. Then in long-range planning, incorporate considerations of energy efficiency and GHG into the guidance, development, and public outreach for the next long-range plan. Tip and tip, development, encourage the planning regions and CDOT to use GHG emission and energy as possible criterion in project selection. And project development, incorporate energy considerations into CDOT design manual and construction specifications. Next, please. The last group I will talk about, and then this time I really am handing it over, is the data and measurement group. This group measured associated GHG emission reduction impacts on the strategies that really rose to the top and explore the order of magnitude of the energy reduction impacts of these various strategies. So
okay, next slide, please. So I think what we want to do now, Michelle did a great job of really setting up the framework that we put in place, which is, many of you know when you participate in a collaborative process, as important as anything that you've kind of got the right ground rules. But we want to talk a bit about how we identified discrete actions where we can analyze some of the benefits and really developed criteria for how to evaluate those. So we're going to go through that and then also discuss some of the analysis and the results that we got that really, again, helped us prioritize these actions going forward. We started with about 80 strategies, and we, as Michelle mentioned, through the process had a number of brainstorming sessions where it was really, share your best idea. I think we all realized that 80 strategies probably isn't immediately something that we can execute, so we need to narrow those down and really identify what the participants can kind of move forward and make some progress on. And so from those 80 strategies, we narrowed it down to about 10, which we're going to discuss in greater detail. There are listed, I think, are some of the reasons where we tossed a strategy out. It was something that's long-term. It's already being done in another effort. It wasn't sufficiently a scope that would have allowed us to do analysis, or that it was something that fell outside of the participants' either area of jurisdiction or influence, and so it wasn't something that we necessarily thought we provided added value on. Next slide, please. So Michelle kind of went through the four basic groups that we had: advanced technology vehicles, alternative fuels, smart systems and smart trips, and planning. We also had a data and measurement group, and so the way that the process worked is really the vehicles and fuels group and the smart systems and smart trips group started out with that list of 80 strategies. The smart systems and smart trips group was extremely prolific, and they actually had 60 of those, and really prioritize those and around the metrics that we had in the previous slide. We worked closely with the data and measurement group to, again, quantify some of the boundaries, what we thought were reasonable expectations, to come up with some of the results we're going to discuss later. I think the planning group was a bit different in that it's a little tougher to quantify some of the benefits of planning, and it was really more focused towards process. And so that's why you see that kind of off on its own on the screening and prioritization chart. Next slide, please. So I think what we want to do is go through, again, kind of the specifics with each of these groups, where we started, what the criteria we applied were, and where we ended up. I helped lead the efforts with Rebecca White from CDOT on advanced technology vehicles and alternative fuels. We really put four basic metrics on everything we looked at, whether this is a technology or a strategy that's commercially viable. I like the example of here, no flying cars. It might be a great solution, but it's not something we necessarily want to be planning around. We want to make sure this is cost effective, especially now. I think that the cost metric is something that we're all heavily scrutinizing. We want to make sure that there's a positive return for our agencies and also our citizens. Also hoping to leverage some economic benefits. How can we use some of these strategies to drive job growth and job creation in Colorado? And then getting back, I think, to the crux of a lot of this is quantifying what some of the air quality benefits we can get looking at greenhouse gases, but also looking at some of the regulated emissions, which are obviously very critical in Colorado. Next slide, please. So these are some of the initial results, really looking at both petroleum reduction and greenhouse gas reduction. This specific strategy and what you're looking at right now is actually builds off a plan put forward by a number of stakeholders in Colorado to promote the use of natural gas in our fleets. This is something, again, kind of alluding back to a comment I made earlier. We import 2/3 of our oil. We export 3/4 of our natural gas. So from an economic and an energy security and even an air quality standpoint, this is a strategy that we think really makes a lot of sense in Colorado, and really when we went through and did the analysis, was one that showed a lot of benefits on the petroleum reduction side because, again, it is a one-to-one displacement, and also from a greenhouse gas emission standpoint. And so I think this is something that we're optimistic about where we're pursuing this in a number of avenues. I will say this is a fairly aggressive scenario, but we also think that it's something that's obtainable, again, just given the resource mix we have in Colorado and some of the efforts we have going on right now. To cover some of the next slide, please. Two of the other strategies that we identified, and we kind of lumped together because, again, the last strategy of just, again, the one-to-one displacement of petroleum with natural gas produced such large results, we actually had to clump the others together to really show what the results were. But we were looking at just basic procurement. What can we do? The state fleet right now, or the state, I should say, really sets the prices for a lot of governments in Colorado. We have municipalities that order off of our state purchasing schedule. And we were thinking about how can we as a state really be a service to local government in providing them low-cost options by just getting some of these alternative fuel or hybrid or advanced vehicle technology products onto our state bid sheet. And, you know, I was personally pretty shocked to see the discounts we get working with the dealers and the auto manufacturers. And so we think that we can really be a catalyst and getting some of these deployed in local government. The second strategy that we looked at was truck stop electrification. And so instead of idling with your engine running, can you plug in and really mitigate some of those diesel emissions at rest areas? And this is, again, another strategy that we're pretty excited about. Colorado has some major transportation corridors with Interstate 70 and Interstate 25. And we've, I think, got a couple pilot projects potentially queued up to really move this forward. Next slide, please. This covers some of the results that we saw. Again, we lumped these together just to really show, with perspective to the first strategy, what some of the impacts were. And I think these will all be available. I don't want to walk through them specifically because they're a bit small, but these are all of it going to be available, I believe, after the webinar. Next strategy, or I'm sorry, next slide. Next slide and next strategy. This is actually one that we didn't quantify because it is a larger project, but we just saw a lot of benefits in looking at, from really the CDOT perspective, what are the opportunities that we have in construction and in design to promote sustainability, looking at everything from idling policies to materials. And I think the reason that we wanted to keep this in the strategies going forward is we just saw such an opportunity here. But there are so many opportunities that, again, it is probably difficult to quantify some of the benefits. Next slide, please. The last thing I'll touch on, which is something that I think really resonated with CDOT and our office, was just the basic concept of energy literacy. And I think this is something that really was a common theme throughout this entire process, was how can we get the right information to the right people and really link together some of the implications of our transportation decisions with our energy use and the subsequent environmental impact. And so again, I think this is a strategy that the Governor's Energy Office and the Department of Transportation are really committed to advancing moving forward. We've had several meetings with our public information officers to discuss how we can message the different projects we're working in terms of either transportation or energy impacts. Really, I think this is a great service that the state can provide to educate our citizens and also, I think, educate ourselves internally with some of the practices that we have in state government. So this is another strategy that wasn't quantified. It's a bit softer in its impact, but I think we all know the power of information, and so we're looking to leverage different outlets and different messages to really see how we can influence consumer behavior. I think with that, we'll go to the next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Studemeyer, who led the effort on smart systems and smart trips.
Thank you, Alex. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Smart Systems and Smart Trips work group. This group considered strategies to provide better transportation services and promote energy efficiency through improving the efficiency of the system, improving travel times, reducing congestion, or providing citizens with more travel choices. So Alex already spoke a bit to kind of the basic screening process we went through. Just a couple of additional points I'll make with regard to this particular group. We really focused on strategies that the participants and their respective agencies could champion or influence. So a lot of strategies we looked at and discussed, but ultimately determined that they were not really within our purview, and we wanted to focus on those strategies that we thought we had a high likelihood of being able to affect the implementation and the outcomes. We focused on strategies that did not face significant political hurdles, that actually we thought had a significant chance of implementation. We focused on strategies that could be quickly developed, things that weren't going to require years of additional study and analysis. So again, these were kind of short to medium term strategies, really more the incremental strategies as opposed to the big long-term strategies. Next slide, please. So the first strategy I'm going to talk about here is truck fleet enhancements. Of the 4 strategies this group looked at, this was the strategy that had the most significant effect on petroleum and GHG reduction. The other 3 strategies were we looked at a pilot implementation level. So at that scale, the benefits were significantly smaller. But this strategy incorporates a variety of enhancements that increase the aerodynamics or fuel efficiency of trucks. It builds upon the EPA SmartWay program, which is a voluntary grant-funded effort to assist trucking companies with the purchase of add-ons to reduce nitric oxide, nitrogen dioxide, and GHG emissions. As part of the discussion surrounding this strategy, we looked at a lot of different subcomponents, but really the focus in particular was on two strategies, the use of low rolling resistance tires and the use of truck fairings to increase vehicle aerodynamics. Looking at the chart here, and what this is showing you is the relative share that this strategy contributed to the total petroleum reduction in our 2 time horizons and the total GHG reduction on 2 time horizons. So if you look at this chart, you'll see that we're not showing any benefits in 2025. And the reason for this is that EPA issued medium and heavy duty fuel economy standards, which are kicking in 2014. And under these new standards, the enhancements that we talked about as part of this strategy would really become standard on vehicles in order to meet fuel economy standards. So they're kind of, at 2025, they're really kind of part of the baseline. They're no longer a separate strategy that we can assume is going to be additional reductions. But at the high level of implementation, this accounted for about 6% of our petroleum reduction and about 18% of our GHG emissions reduction. To just put it in terms of absolute values, that's we estimated this strategy would reduce between 1 and 2 million gallons of petroleum by 2015 and have a GHG emission reduction benefit of between 9,000 and 22,000 metric tons. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the other 3 strategies this group looked at were really small-scale implementation pilot strategies. And so I'm just going to kind of show the data on that together as one. But the first strategy I'm going to talk about here is enhanced real-time traveler information. The Smart Systems TRIPS group explored options to enhance real-time traveler information and focused in particular on the use of a smartphone app. So the work group recommended the development of a smartphone application that could provide travelers with real-time traveler information such as estimated trip time, road closures and traffic conditions, and the best time of day to travel on a given route. We also discussed some additional enhancements that could include building in alternate route trip data, integration of other travel modes, information on alternative fueling station locations, and also coordination with merchants to provide incentives from nearby businesses when travel delay is anticipated. So kind of trying to build in some incentive mechanisms to maybe get people off the road during peak travel times. And the analysis that we conducted for this looked at a pilot implementation of this strategy on the I-70 mountain corridor from approximately Denver to Vail, Colorado, which is a very heavily used recreational corridor. The second pilot strategy we explored was speed harmonization. Speed harmonization involves the use of variable speed limit signs and law enforcement to regulate speed and reduce turbulence, providing congestion relief and safety benefits. Speed harmonization has the potential to reduce incidents, improve safety, and reduce traffic delays. The group suggested exploring the effectiveness of speed harmonization in reducing congestion and GHG emissions. And this strategy builds upon preliminary efforts of CDOT to pilot speed harmonization on I-70 of the mountains. Finally, our third strategy was a strategy focused on enhancements to transit, looking at technological enhancements to provide better traveler information and provide more efficient scheduling and fares. This strategy would build upon existing efforts of the Denver Area Regional Transportation District to deploy a smart card, which is an electronic fare option that can increase efficiency in boarding, reduce idling times, and provide additional data on transit use. Next slide. So
I just to mention here that our time is getting close, so we should try and wrap up the presentation in the next 5 minutes or so. Thanks.
So we can, with that, we can probably move on.
All right, well, great. Thanks, Jeff. Alex and Jeff did a great job of walking us through the 10 strategies that their groups identified as priorities. And of those 10, the data and measurement group was able to analyze 7. And the reason why we couldn't analyze all of them, as Alex alluded to, was that these other strategies required additional discussion and refinement to properly scope. So examples of those were energy literacy and sustainability in design and construction, which were just too amorphous for the group to quantify. So after the group identified which strategies were eligible for quantification, we began looking at existing emission models that were out there that we could use, and we used the EPA's MOVES model and then also basic GHG calculators such as ICLEI's CAFA. Other strategies that we couldn't find models for, we used by just using best professional judgment to scope, estimate reductions, and then applied nationally recognized emission factors. And in either case, we had to build a variety of assumptions for each strategy, and this was the most difficult and time-consuming part of the process. The report will go into more detail and also provide examples of what models and strategies were used to quantify each strategy. But basically, after the scoping was defined, the strategies could then be quantified, and we developed a strategy evaluation matrix to provide a consistent framework to analyze these. We were primarily looking at petroleum displacement measured in gallons, and then GHG reductions measured in metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. As a secondary level of analysis, we also looked at the estimated cost of implementation, relative ease of implementation, and the potential for partnership. Next slide. And as the results came in, it became pretty evident that the strategies fell into 2 different categories: the pilot strategies, represented in tan on the screen, and then also those that encompassed a broader regional or statewide scale. So this chart showing the relative share of the pilot strategies to all the strategies in 2015. Next slide. And looking at the results across the same time period for GHG emissions, the results looked a little bit different, and this is because petroleum reduction and GHG reduction are not on a one-to-one displacement basis. The GHG emission reduction was calculated as the net reduction displacing petroleum, but we also had to account for the new fuel source as a replacement, and this is why we see truck fleet enhancements representing a much larger piece of the pie, because fuel formerly combusted through idling was replaced by electricity, which is a much cleaner source of energy. Next slide. And in 2025, we no longer see a benefit from truck fleet enhancements because of this, as Jeff mentioned, the new medium and heavy duty fuel standards. Next slide. And the results for GHG emission reductions were similar to fuel in this case for 2025. Next slide. And looking at the pilot strategies, the transit and the truck stop electrification really rose to the top in terms of their ability to reduce GHGs and petroleum. However, it's important to note that we do think that the smartphone app and speed harmonization could have merit, it's difficult to say at this point. The reason why they didn't register very high on this chart is because they were a very small pilot program, limited to a very small stretch of the I-70 corridor. So once we get results in for these pilot programs, if they're successful, there is potential to broaden the scope and perhaps reassess some of the strategies. Next slide. And the results of the statewide analysis revealed that NGV partnerships had by far the greatest reduction. However, I wanted to point out this strategy is also very expensive, and I don't want it to overshadow the other two strategies, which also had merit, particularly the truck fleet enhancement strategy. Next slide. And overall, the cumulative results at a high level of deployment in 2015 looked about a 0.4% reduction, and in 2025 we were able to see about 5% higher than that, 5.4%. So our biggest lesson that we learned was that while we could have pursued more aggressive strategies or broadened the scope, which might have been beneficial, we were really focusing on quick win strategies that could be achieved in the short to medium time frame. And next slide, and with that I'll pass it on to Michelle to wrap up.
Okay, well I grew up Becky, so hopefully my fast talking will kick in. I'm going to try to close this in 1 minute. We had a final CET meeting in September of 2000. Actually, this was we did full circle. We came back and did a report out in September 2011. And the final meeting, next slide please. Next slide please. Was in November 2011, where all our participants signed a recognition board. Next slide. I'm not going to take the time to go through all these strategies, but I do want to let you know that we've made great strides and progress on many of these strategies, even though we just completed this in November. Next, please. The next steps, we will have a report out for everyone shortly within the next few days. We are going to go ahead and continue the conversations around this topic in the next long-range plan. And CDOT's Executive Director and GEO's Executive Director committed to coming back in 2012 and checking on the implementation, status, and progress of these new opportunities. Next, please. So if I can leave you with any sage advice, some of these key takeaways, I believe, which made this a success was to have realistic expectations. The benefits from partnering. A consortium of agencies makes a difference. Senior management buy-in and support is key. Report back early and often, which means the participants reported back to their senior management early and often. Quick wins equals baby steps to success. Expand regional efforts to statewide level. Research work prior to the work group meetings is really instrumental in getting things done expeditiously. And sufficient time to measure the strategies. You really need time to do an iterative process. So with that, I'll close. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we've got a little bit of time for questions here. The first one that came in is, will the presentation slides be available? Yes, the slides are going to be posted up. We'll have a recording of this webinar with the audio as well up on the SSTI website. That's www.ssti.us. The next question, on the CNG fleets strategy, what were your assumptions on vehicle availability and levels of fueling infrastructure?
Sure. We'll let Sabrina answer that.
So because this strategy was developed within a group we have called the Colorado Natural Gas Vehicle Coalition, we were fortunate to have this strategy be pretty well fleshed out in terms of vehicles and how many stations would be needed for each vehicle and that sort of thing. I'm pulling out my GREET modeling input right now, but I can say that in the earlier part when we're ramping up production, it's mainly reliant on heavy-duty municipal fleet vehicles. We're looking at things like refuse vehicles and street sweepers and school buses and transit buses. As it ramps up larger and we get to that 25% petroleum market share, we are expecting public retailers to at that point have a pretty significant market share of the CNG fueling market. Let me pull out. Are you interested in exactly how many vehicles or how many stations?
It was just typed in, so I'm
Okay.
not sure.
We can go ahead and make the assumptions available later. I can do a write-up.
Okay, that'd be great. And we have another question. Could you please explain further the pie charts describing the greenhouse gas reductions related to truck fleet enhancements? And I can go back to that slide, and one of you can join there. I think that's 34 or thereabouts. Yeah, here we go.
This is Jeff. I can try to answer that. So essentially, the 2025 charts are showing no benefit. What 2015 is showing is it's showing you the relative share of this strategy of all the reductions from all the strategies that were analyzed combined. And the low and the high slivers are kind of breaking it up between a low and a high level of implementation. So at a low level of implementation, this strategy would result in 3% of all the fuel reduction that we calculated in our analysis. At a high level of implementation, you get an additional 3%. So at a high, it's actually 6% of the total reduction. And the same interpretation on the GHG side. It's at low level of implementation, 7% of our total GHG reduction in 2015 comes from this strategy. At a high level, it's actually 18%.
All right. Thank you. And the next question was on the truck stop electrification pilot program. Could you describe the strategy further and what were the findings from the pilot program? That's for the truck stop electrification.
CDOT has just gotten money in our budget to implement the pilot program, and we're actually still awaiting final federal approval for the scope of work. So we have designed a pilot, but we have not implemented yet. We're planning to begin implementation this year, pending FHWA approval of funding.
Okay, thank you. And
this is Deb. Maybe if I could just expand on that a little bit. We have done some pre-work and have identified, we went through a phase 1 study and did identify the most applicable locations, and our intent is, well, we've actually, from that, we identified numerous locations, and we've evaluated those and have focused in on one location that we would like to test this at. So that's currently, so that part has already been done.
Great. And the next question we have here are, here's one. As I'm sure you're aware, the EU is working rigorously on greenhouse gas reduction within its 2020 plan. Have you considered widening the scope to an international collaboration since greenhouse gases are not region specific?
No, not at this time. As I said, this was a select group just for this initiative. We will include other stakeholders. Most certainly, special interest groups need to be involved in this conversation, and also the public at large. So we will scope this a little bit better and do some more outreach during developing the plan.
Another question is, can you list the 10 strategies developed?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we can do that. Let me get to my list here.
And these will actually be included in the report in more detail.
But starting on the fuels and vehicles side, the first strategy was promote public-private partnerships and shared station agreements to support natural gas in vehicles in fleets. The second strategy was the truck stop electrification pilot program. The third strategy was consolidate alternative fuel and vehicle procurement for public fleets. Another strategy was sustainability in design and construction. The energy literacy program. We had one strategy we didn't discuss because it wasn't very well developed, but it was along looking at some kind of long-term policy options. We had the smartphone application, the speed harmonization pilot, the truck fleet enhancements, and then the enhancements to transit traveler information and scheduling fares.
All right. Next question, are there any next steps to work with the MPOs on project selection criteria that consider greenhouse gas emissions?
That would certainly be a topic of discussion when developing the next long-range plan. Yes, we've begun to have some of those conversations already.
And are you planning on expanding the speed harmonization pilot program to better gauge its potential benefits?
This is Deb. This past winter, and here in Colorado, the issue usually occurs on the weekends in a particular corridor, and it's recreational trips, people going up to ski, and sometimes in the summer. Well, the pilot, we actually used pace cars to keep an even speed, and we actually tested some of that this winter, and there's a lot of data that was collected. And we have now finished the testing part in terms of actually implementing the pacing of the traffic flow. And we're now taking a look at that data. And until we look at the data and see, did that help in terms of speeds, did that reduce accidents, we won't know the results, but we're doing that analysis now.
All right, great. Well, that is about it for the questions that have come in, and we're just about at the end of our time limit. I just wanted to remind everybody that again that we'll have this recorded webinar available on the SSTI website. If not this afternoon, then on Monday morning it should be ready for download. And thanks again to all of our presenters here. Very informative, interesting project. So thanks again. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you can all make it to our April 27th webinar on the Kansas School Siting Project.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.